Hello, I'm Mishka, and this channel is the Helsinki Renaissance, where we will be talking about arts and culture, and hopefully the most Renaissance-man-like manner in which arts and culture may be discussed, so please stay tuned for that. Now, I didn't mean to make this video, but I just happened to see, I don't know, let's call them advertisements for some magazine articles on a certain website, and so without intending to, I saw a couple of different headlines about the legendary Finnish artist called Darude and his Eurovision Song Contest performance or something like that. So the first magazine article advertisement that I saw was the Spanish Eurovision Song Contest contestant. I don't remember his name, but whoever that gentleman was, he said how relatively shocked he was that an artist with comparatively high levels of recognition, such as Darude, that he performed so badly in the semi-final stage. Then, you know, I didn't watch the Eurovisions. I wasn't at all on the map about what was going on. I had heard that Darude was there, but that was the extent. I mean, that was the full extent of my investment in the whole situation. So I just happened to know that Darude was there. That's it. So I saw that interview of the Spanish contestant, and then earlier today I saw another newspaper story about. It was some sort of story just wondering how it is that Finland performed as badly as it did, you know, whoever wrote that, I guess we'll call it a column. Whoever wrote it was just wondering how it is possible that Darude could finish last in his semifinals, because, you know, I mean, I said it mildly tongue-in-cheek at the beginning of the video that Darude would be a legendary artist, in that he is still the only Finnish artist who has a Billboard #1 song with Sandstorm, obviously, to his name, and no other Finnish artist have been able to get anywhere near that kind of you know, biggest song in America type success. So and obviously Darude has become quite the online meme, almost rivaling Rick Astley's Never Gonna Give You Up. But anyway, so that other column that I saw earlier today was just wondering how it is possible that Darude was able to, you know, finish last, given that he was probably one of the few artists in the competition who has notable name recognition to him. And I guess I'm doing this video trying to answer that question, how it is possible that Darude can finish last. I guess I'm positing that Darude finishing last is kind of emblematic about where Finnish culture is. Now, I don't want to draw, you know, I don't want to use the Eurovision Song Contest as meaning more than it does. So I don't want to get carried away with this kind of an analogy, because Sweden tends to do rather well in the Eurovision Song Contest. So, like, some of my viewers, you may or may not know that as far as exporting music globally is concerned, United States is the single biggest exporting culture zone. Great Britain is the second biggest, and Sweden is the third biggest. And Sweden regularly does rather well, for whatever it's worth, in the Eurovision Song Contest, whereas Britain regularly has done, like, Britain has almost always finished in the bottom 5 in the finals when I've paid any kind of attention to it. So Britain is a bigger music exporter than Sweden, but Sweden is seen as getting it right as far as the Eurovision Song Contest is concerned, and Britain is seen as getting it wrong. And Finland obviously has the kind of performance levels closer to Britain than to Sweden, and I probably am one of the few people in Finland who has some sort of a, I don't know, theory or a feeling of understanding just why it is that Sweden reaches some kind of optimal level of performance with their presence in this competition, and why Britain habitually underperforms. And some people could say that Finland habitually underperforms as well, or others might think that Finland just wouldn't have as much talent as some other cultures on, and they think that Finland shouldn't rank nearer the top or whatever. But the Eurovision Song Contest, it is kind of a game, and it's a game that a person may win if they just make winning moves. So, I mean, theoretically, a country like Armenia or a country like, I don't know, Andorra, I mean, there's nothing preventing Andorra from winning it every year. It's just that, well, I mean, obviously, the odds are against any individual country winning it a multitude of times. So if there's country A versus the field, it's always the smarter bet to bet on the field long term. But we don't need to get into that. Just saying that it's like there's no particular reason why Andorra shouldn't win, and similarly there's no particular reason why Finland shouldn't win. It's just that some people play the game better than others. And I think that Finland and Britain, one thing that they have in common that apparently Sweden doesn't, and certainly America wouldn't, is that there is a certain kind of a drawback in the genteel attitude that is becoming apparent with countries like Britain or Finland, in that with this kind of overtly genteel culture zones, certain kind of things are deemed unseemly, as it were, and as such, if Sweden is the world's third biggest pop music exporter, it's because Sweden, even though Sweden is much more bourgeois and conservative a culture zone than Finland is, Sweden clearly has some strand in their culture where people have this kind of supremely pragmatic attitude towards crafting pop music. And when you have a pragmatic attitude, you don't worry about things that are unseemly. You just, well, as the Nike slogan goes, you just do it. So the reason I would argue that if the Eurovision Song Contest is a kind of game, and it's a game that you can win by making winning moves, like the countries that just do it, the countries that don't worry about all the stuff that you don't need to worry about, those that just do it, they do well. And the countries that are kind of lost in the nonsense of worrying about secondary things, they don't tend to perform well. So I would just put that as the starting place. And so I would say that there's no reason why Finland couldn't get to the same kind of pragmatic pop music manufacturing track that Sweden is on. And I'm saying that Finland, like in Sweden, people probably have, like if you look across Europe, Sweden is probably the #1 country where the music industry has a base level of respect to the Eurovision Song Contest, in that Britain is probably the country where its native musicians have the least amount of respect for the Eurovision Song Contest. The high-profile musicians don't want anything to do with the Eurovision Song Contest, and then in Sweden, probably the lack of respect is the least among the kind of major culture zones. So, I would say that Finland probably has some of the British, like Finland is maybe kind of a mixture of the Swedish and British mentality in this regard, that Finnish musicians don't have any respect as such for the Eurovision Song Contest, but the thing is that I think Finnish musicians are more generally accepting of, well, it's a job and somebody needs to do it, and you might as well play there or play, like, it's not worse playing there than somewhere else. So there's a kind of pragmatism from Finnish musicians towards the Eurovision Song Contest, so it's not entirely a losing effort trying to get some quote, leading Finnish musicians to participate in that. So anyway, Finland maybe is closer to Sweden than Britain as far as trying to get some of the musicians to make some sort of a professional, high-profile effort as far as that kind of a game of Eurovision Song Contest, participation is concerned. But I would say that you can. Well, the reason why I'm doing this video is because I want to read all of the Finnish arts and media presence through how it is that Darude, who, if we take the Spanish person's interview as a starting point, it might be argued that Darude was on, to use a baseball analogy, that Darude was on third base and he just needed to somehow just do enough to feel like he hit a home run. So like Darude had a massive advantage, theoretically speaking, because of his name recognition. All of the success in media, entertainment and arts is rigged towards celebrities, following the Matthew principle of the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. The media sphere is rigged towards the famous people becoming exponentially more famous, and there's just an avalanche, the kind of snowball effect that basically it's the easiest to make money with the biggest celebrities. That's why Hollywood wants to keep a small pool of superstars that keep a small pool of tentpole movies maximally profitable. And that's why, David Guetta and Ariana Grande and, a small pool of pop music artists are in that kind of a rarefied superstar air because it's the easiest to make money with the biggest celebrities. So arts and entertainment, it's very much rigged towards making celebrities perform better than obscurities. So that's kind of the reason why Darude would be on third base in this kind of analogy. But I think it's emblematic of the kind of sluggishness towards the Finnish culture and towards a lot of these European cultures where, you know, should I have an international viewer for this video, they mightn't care about the performance trends in Finland, but you can sort of use this, like, if there are other European culture zones that are either just treading water with what they are exporting, or in some cases are trending down, like France, in that from one decade to another, French culture just seems less relevant on the global stage than before. In that, if they didn't have the French house scene, I just don't know what exactly France even would export anymore. So that the step down from the kind of center of universe position that's some people maybe thought that Picasso's Paris had in his day and so on, like those days are pretty long gone by this stage. So whether some European countries are either just flatlining or trending down, they can, you know, use this kind of video as food for thought as to what's going wrong and why something is going wrong. And I would say that if we're looking at the countries that are exporting the best, so let's look at the list of United States, Great Britain and Sweden. I would say that the countries that are exporting the best are those that have a purely pragmatic attitude towards a given release being a product, and a product that you can try to control the success of the product through adjusting your behavior to historical trends. So like people who want to identify as you know, artists with a capital A, they don't particularly like the kind of corporate attitude where the worth of a work of art is tied to the kind of financial yields that may be gotten out of releasing it. But you know, I would say that ignorance isn't particularly a virtue, so being oblivious as to how the market operates isn't a good thing. So even if you want to ignore you know, what is profitable and why something is profitable, even if you want to ignore that, it's still better to know and to have certain kind of theories as to how things operate than to not know. So I would just put that out there. But basically, I do see a certain kind of basic level pragmatism as absolutely the key to why some culture zones have an inside track to exporting what they are exporting, and how some culture zones have to take the longer road on the fringe of the scene. So if you are running in circles, obviously the inside track is a shorter distance than the outside track. So you know, hence the analogy. But anyway, so Darude should have been in a position to certainly get into the finals and do better in the finals just by the virtue of being Darude. But unfortunately, if Darude got a bigger break by being a celebrity, he, you know, got the opposite of a break by being a Finnish person rather than a Swedish person, because he's now in this kind of he's in this sluggish, indifferent, you know, borderline oblivious market position where Finnish people don't want to play the game as pragmatically as Swedish people or Americans do, and so that's why you can't maximize you cannot maximize on your potential when you don't restrict yourself by making what are generally winning maneuvers based on historical patterns. And that's why Darude, he demonstrated this kind of almost heroic naivete in that he would just go there and just do something and it has whatever effects it has. I mean, that is basically an amateurish main idea, and with an amateurish main idea, you put yourself at a disadvantage against those who are restricting themselves to a professional attitude that preoccupies itself with making winning plays. That it's just easier to win when you give yourself that kind of an inside track. And so basically, if we are looking at the aesthetics of pop music, I would say that a general formula for how to win in pop music is that there's a central paradox that I remember one Simpsons episode making a joke about. So they are test screening certain new cartoons with some kids who just happen to be there. And they were asking the question, do you want characters to do something drastically new and get into these completely out of this world situations? And then the kid said that, sure, why not? Yeah, that sounds like a great movie. And then the other question is, or do you want characters going through these very relatable everyday situations, to which the kids still said yes, they want relatable stories. So there's this thesis and antithesis about do you want storytelling that's something completely different, something unlike what anyone has done, or do you want storytelling that's safe and predictable? So I would say that the kind of the truth to that kind of Simpson joke is that the audience wants both the thesis and the antithesis somehow synthesized in storytelling. The audience wants something exotic, the audience wants something different, but they want something exotic and different in the kind of safe, relatable manner. So as an artist, if you want popular success, you need to synthesize the two extremes of giving something unique in a generic manner. That's the ultimate secret to the pop formula. And that's why, some countries like United States, Great Britain, Sweden, they are succeeding in that kind of formula because they merely accept that the audience isn't going to change. Like, you can try to release something different and try to change the audience with your different release, but the audience won't change. The audience doesn't care what you think about their demands. The audience is going to keep demanding things and keep doing things the way that they are. And the artists that cater to the audience will succeed, and the artists that ignore the audience will be relegated to the fringes. Hence, the kind of lionizing of pragmatism throughout this, monologue that I'm doing, in that regardless of what you think about the audience preferences, there is no historical patterns for success that involve being hostile to the audience. So if you want to succeed, you basically do need to take the audience preferences into consideration. And I'm saying that the reason why a country like Sweden does as well as it does in that kind of pop music exporting is because Sweden isn't ashamed of trafficking in the kind of lowest common denominator core between different pop songs. So that if simplicity, sing-along ability, and catchiness in a chorus, if more advanced musicians would be ashamed of doing some, baby love, you're my baby love type, like Motown song variation type stuff. If some more advanced musicians would be ashamed of doing that, Sweden has apparently the greatest amount of professional musicians who feel zero shame about just doing that kind of, poor man's EDM cheese versions of old Motown songs or whatever. So, like, that kind of pragmatism of Sweden just giving the audience what the audience wants. If the audience is banging the table saying that they want candy, then Sweden, opens the floodgates and in comes the candy, as it were. So, like, Finland doesn't do that, which is why Finland loses the popularity contest that Sweden is winning. So, I'm not saying whether it's wrong or right, but again, if the Eurovision Song Contest is a game, it's a game that may be won, whether you're Andorra or Iceland or Ukraine or Malta. It's a game that may be won by making a greater amount of winning plays than the other contestants are making. So I would say that if you make some sort of a, I don't know, matrix out of, like, if you try to mathematically showcase some sort of a pop music formula, then, like, the ability to synthesize the different kinds of strands of the audience ultimately wanting a generic core to the pop song and wanting a certain kind of simplicity, like that's one trend, and the audience wanting something done uniquely and with the kind of likable emotional core. Like, there's a couple of different lines that you need to pick the optimal position in. And I think that the kind of what passes for competence in countries like United States or Sweden, I think the reason why they do differently is that for them, competence is knowing what the audience wants and giving it to them. And for what passes as competence in some other culture zones might be some kind of next level abilities of going beyond the basics and having some sort of a more elaborate, presence in the culture or whatever. But, like, I don't want to pit those two attitudes against one another, but you might as well face reality in that the countries that accept the audience and give the audience what they want, they do well on the exporting level. And the countries that whether they have a haughty attitude towards the audience or whether they have this kind of, blushing, genteel, shoegazer, oh, why little old me wouldn't dream of giving the audience something. Like, whether they have that kind of almost servile level of humility, whether it's the height of pride or the height of some kind of meekness, either way, those who don't put themselves as parallel lines to the audience, they won't do well with the audience. So it's just like you get what you I don't know, request, or what, well, you get what you put down, let's say. So that there isn't any kind of there isn't any kind of great confusion as to how these things are happening. In that, if I said earlier that the success in arts and entertainment and media is rigged towards the celebrities, like with exporting anything, it is rigged towards the bigger players becoming even bigger. Like if Malta hasn't exported massive amounts of movies or literature recently, like it's not meant to happen that a small country becomes a big player in the exporting. In that the countries that were big yesterday will be big today and will be even bigger tomorrow. That's how things are meant to happen. That the big become even more exponentially big. That's how things are meant to happen. And obviously, a country like Sweden, if they are in a rare air of maximizing on their potential, they can move up a weight class, and there's no reason why a country like Malta or a country like Slovakia couldn't do the same if they merely optimize themselves to the right kind of standard. So again, it's just the kind of situation that a small country that doesn't have a tradition of success, they won't just magically fail upwards. Like, people can be dismissive towards the pop music written in Sweden or United States, but they succeed because they set out to succeed. Whereas Darude, when he entered the Eurovision Song Contest, he didn't particularly make it his business to succeed. He just showed up, and he had this kind of gentleman amateur attitude of, well, let the audience decide what they like. If they like this song, fine. If they don't like this song, fine. So they clearly didn't like his song, and, he was fine with failure, and he failed. And, clearly that kind of attitude where you don't see much of a difference between winning and losing, it is conducive to, losing gracefully. It just seems to be how it happens. So if you don't demand the best of yourself, you don't probably get that best. You're not anywhere near the best. So again, the reason why, like, if Sweden does drastically better than Finland with, say, exporting pop music or performing at the Eurovision Song Contest, it's because Sweden makes it a bigger priority. Sweden demands of themselves that they perform at a set level, and then they aren't just fine with losing. They aren't just fine with not getting things moving forward. They demand that of themselves, and they get something comparable to that kind of demand. Now, obviously, just because you are really gung-ho about success doesn't mean that you absolutely get it. But if a given country has 100,000 people trying to succeed, it's not essential that all of them succeed as long as, let's say, the square root of that group succeeds. It would be enough to have a kind of a bigger presence on the arts and entertainment map. So again, as long as, if there's large enough a pool of people and all of them are setting the bar high, then there is a kind of elite that forms over who gets over the bar, and then those individuals are basically they manage to move the needle and make a given culture zone a bigger player. The way that when Paris had Jean-Paul Sartre and Albert Camus, when they had Jean-Luc Godard and Pablo Picasso, when they had Igor Stravinsky and Samuel Beckett, Paris, like those individuals managed to move the needle and make Paris this kind of center of the arts. And without those individuals, tourists, they go to Paris, like they're equally happy to take selfies at the Moulin Rouge or at the Louvre or at the Eiffel Tower or at the Folies Bergère or whatever. Like, the tourists don't really distinguish too much between Samuel Beckett and the Folies Bergère in that it's just kind of exotica to them. So, like, if that is the kind of situation that people in Paris have the kind of attitude that, well, if we have Samuel Beckett and Pablo Picasso's fine, and if we don't have, then fine. Like, that's obviously not an attitude of trending on up. It's an attitude of either mildly trending down or just treading water and taking advantage of the kind of bigger position on the map of, like, Paris has profiled itself as some sort of a city of delights or city of love, or they live by the river. I mean, what do you want to say about them? I don't know. But like, Paris has managed to profile itself as something, city of culture, city of, I don't know, city of something. They feel fine with that inertia, and that's why we aren't seeing any kind of renaissance of French culture. And that perhaps French literature right now is the most irrelevant it's ever been. French theater, French painting, French sculpture, all of that, because of that kind of sluggish attitude. Basically, every single art form in France is in the lowest point of global relevance that it's ever been. So basically, if, like, this should be a kind of cause for pause in places like Finland. So if a place like Paris, with legendary, traditions of success, that, like, some of the greatest artists of all time either have been either have worked in Paris or have somehow been affiliated with Paris or have been popular in Paris or something. But like, Paris has been historically one of the major centers in the arts and entertainment world, whether they are native Parisians or immigrants like Picasso, Stravinsky, like, however you wanna put it, like, Paris has been a major global center of the arts, and if they, just sluggishly accepting inertia, if they can make themselves not particularly relevant, why should a smaller culture zone, not get the same results, except even far worse, because the inertia of a big culture zone still yields certain kind of returns, whereas the inertia of small culture zones just breeds this kind of, as Morrissey might put it, this is a coastal town that they forgot to shut down type situations, in that, like, if success was effortlessly easy, everyone would do it. Everyone would have success, but it's not effortlessly easy. But the key is in the word effortless, in that you should make an effort. If no success is when there's effortless, then success then success should be when there's effort, there's success. So, like, there's no reason why Paris shouldn't, like, if Paris has had artists like Picasso and Camus in the past, there's no reason why they shouldn't have a great artist in the future if something in how the culture zone operates changes. Like, Britain has some of the most legendary musicians of all time. If they merely chose to make more of an effort with the Eurovision Song Contest, they could get the results that would reflect on the talent level in the United Kingdom. Same thing with Finland, in that if people like Darude merely made the choice of demanding success from them in the Eurovision Song Contest, rather than had that kind of a drawback of the Lutheran attitude of, oh, why should little old me, bring something to hundreds of millions of people? Like, Sweden doesn't think like that. United States doesn't think like that. People in Great Britain, people earlier in French culture didn't think like that. Like, people who don't have that attitude of, oh, why should little old me seek to speak to hundreds of millions of people? The people who succeed, they just do it. You don't worry about why should I X, Y, and Z. You just do it. You don't worry about what is the worth of a pop song. You just do it. Like Don McLean, when he released American Pie, he didn't think what the worth in it was. When Billy Joel released We Didn't Start the Fire, he didn't become neurotic of, is this just a poor man's American Pie? He didn't worry about it, he just did it. So if Darude, like if We Didn't Start the Fire would be like a poor man's American Pie, if Darude would have written something that would have the market position of being a poor man's version of X, the reason why Sweden does well on the pop music exporting scene is because Swedish artists don't worry whether something is the poor man's something, they just do it. In the United States, they don't worry about whether something is the poor man's whatever, they just do it. Like, that's why the big culture zones succeed. They have so many people who just do it. And the reason why some countries like Finland, they don't succeed as well is because there aren't people who just go and do it. Like, how Darude would have optimized his chances in the Eurovision Song Contest would have been if A, he would have gone there and be like, saying to everyone that he's a celebrity, he's the Darude. Everyone knows him, he's the biggest star there. Like, if he had gone there with that kind of an anti-Lutheran attitude of, baby, I'm a star, and you're gonna love that. Like, if he had gone there with that attitude, he would have put himself on the inside track of making a winning play. But he didn't do that. Instead, he made himself a wallflower as the biggest star in the competition. So that's not great. And then if Darude had gone there and be like, I'm gonna write the cheesiest EDM anthem anyone's ever written. It's gonna make the Swedish house mafia look like they have some sort of an industrial, abrasive aesthetic. I'm gonna write the biggest, most layered, cheesy synth choruses anyone's ever tried. Like, this is gonna make Sommartider, hey, hey, Sommartider, sound like, it's post-punk or something. Like, Darude should have had that attitude of basically turning it into a bit of a joke, but a joke that he takes seriously, of just doing some EDM cheese and seeing what happens. Like, obviously, you don't write a song you think is bad, but you write a song that you don't necessarily think it's the best that you can write, but you have reasons to suspect that the audience would be more than happy to jam along to it. Like, that kind of relative shamelessness is what Americans specialize in. Hollywood doesn't worry whether people think that their cheesy releases are stupid. They make money with that stupidity. American pop stars don't worry whether their cheesy songs are stupid. They make massive amounts of money with that stupidity. Like, that's what Darude should have been thinking about. He should have just, as the line in All the President's Men goes, he should have just followed the money. Like, look at what the people who are making money, what they are doing. They're doing something cheesy. They're doing something that's simple. They're doing something that has mild doses of exotism in a safe generic product. That's what David Guetta does, and he's massively well compensated for it. We don't need to worry whether David Guetta is the best DJ in the world or not. He's finding success because he accepts the audience as they are. And so there's like two main levels. Like, first, you acclimatize yourself to the traditions of success, that culture there. That's the inside track. Like, Darude has acclimatized himself to the outside track of not having success. Finnish musicians aren't on a track of particularly great international relevance. Like, sometimes Finnish musicians find success in certain kind of hyper-specific sub-genres, like melodic metal, or I don't know, like classical music, or like progressive house or something. Like, there can be these hyper-specific sub-genres, or like, fake Britpop bands, like, Finnish musicians can have success with those kind of hyper-specific aesthetics where there isn't necessarily great internal competition for positions in the market. So it's not as if the market is just completely oversaturated with melodic trash bands. So that's why Aleksi Laiho can have the kind of success that he does, because he gives the audience what they want in a market that has a market deficiency with the product. So that's why some melodic metal bands, for instance, can find great success, is because of the comparative market deficiency on the global landscape. So when you look at all of the fields where Finnish musicians are having major level success, I would argue that all of those fields are ones where the public who is somehow attuned towards those kind of sub-genres, they feel like they have a greater appetite for it that the market isn't fulfilling. So if there aren't that many metal bands, or if there aren't that many high-profile newer metal bands, Finnish metal bands can have a greater inside track towards success, not because of necessarily overflowing virtues on their own part, although they may have those, but simply because of the lack of competition for those spotlight positions. Like, because of the lack of competition for those, that's why Finnish people, just by arriving, can be internationally lauded by addressing that kind of market deficiency. Whereas when there are some fields where the market is like oversaturated with something, so let's say that hip hop has crossed over to the mainstream, and there's a lot of like pop, hip hop fusion material out there. If the market is absolutely oversaturated with releases like that in recent years, Finnish people cannot have any kind of international traction with those kinds of releases, because the market just has so much competition that Finnish people aren't winning that kind of competition with the kind of efforts that they are having right now. So again, like with success in pop music, the first thing is to look at the general landscape, and like there's the landscape and then there's you, and you have a set amount of control what where you are acclimatizing in that landscape. If as Darude you're acclimatizing yourself to the habits of the outside track, you cannot expect inside track results if you don't acclimatize to the inside track culture. And so that's the first thing. And then the second thing that you can absolutely control is your own effort. Like if your effort is from 0 to 100, like if you're being honest, if you're being brutally honest with yourself, how much of an effort are you putting in a given situation? And, you know, it's probably not 100, it's probably not 80, it's probably not even 50, like it's probably closer to like 10 or 12, in that you really are making the barest of investment in a given situation. It's not as if you work 10 years on a song. It's not as if you tirelessly create new breakthroughs in aesthetics to create a song. That would be like 100%. Like you really going above the Call of Duty to get something right. Like that's 100%. And then like 1% is like improvising on the spot of hey baby, you're so fine, you blow my mind. You know, like don't write that, or representatives of Tony Basil might sue you. but anyway, like if that's like 1%, you know, it's obviously probably going to be somewhere between 1 and 100, and you know, a lot of the Finnish Eurovision Song Contest situations, you know, summed up, they acclimatize to the outside track rather than the inside track. That's a bad idea. Sweden acclimatizes to the inside track, not the outside track. That's a good idea. And then the respect for the audience, the respect for the effort, that's something you can control. And Sweden makes more of an effort, makes more of a respect to the audience preferences. That's a good thing. Finland makes less of an effort, and even though it's not over haughty pride, Finland still doesn't have the kind of respect for the audience of just thinking that the audience is an integral element in the culture, and if you want to move someplace, you need to move with a little help from the audience, and the audience won't give you any help if you don't give them what they want. So the kind of reciprocity in success is something that people either take for granted or don't want to look at all, but like it's something to be considered. And when, you know, if we are looking at why some countries don't have a very successful film scene, or why some countries don't have any high profile authors or whatever, like regardless of what we want to focus on, like these kind of general trends to success, general historical trends with winning products, like they are generally applicable regardless of what the culture, what the field and culture we are looking at. And that's why, you know, there's an old Hollywood anecdote, I forgot who it's attributed to, but somebody said that there are no small roles, there are only small actors. Like, I feel like something like that explains everything about something like not succeeding at the Eurovision Song Contest. Like, the people who don't succeed because they think that it's a small role. But really, it's not a small role, you're just a small musician by not succeeding. In that greatness is when you meet the difficult goals that you set out for yourself. You don't just have the sluggish attitude of inertia. You set a goal to yourself. That goal is reasonably demanding, and when you meet that reasonably demanding goal, you have reached greatness in that moment. And Eurovision Song Contest, if it's a game that can be won, it can be won by people who succeed greatness. Like, some people think that it's cheesy greatness or camp greatness or whatever. It doesn't matter. It's a game that can be won. There's nothing great about losing a game. So even if winning wouldn't be all important, or even if some people think that winning wouldn't be this or that, it's still better than losing. And again, like countries like Finland, they should check themselves in moments like this. Are they demanding greatness? Are they preoccupied with greatness? You know, are they anywhere near on the map when it comes to things like greatness? And the answer is no. Because there is this kind of Lutheran sluggishness and the embarrassment of just accepting the inertia, the kind of culture zone. Like, we don't have a very masculine attitude towards this kind of competitions, in that it's as if we think that it's embarrassing to want to succeed. It's as if we think that it's embarrassing to break a sweat. It's as if we think that it's embarrassing to want to win in some given situation. Like, that is a loser culture that thinks like that. You know? Like, people who play a given sport professionally, it's their job to bring their A game. It's their job. Like, anyone could play the game. You're paid to win. You're paid for the winning effort ultimately. And if you don't bring the winning effort, you're gonna be unemployed pretty soon. Because, like, you are at the replacement level or below replacement level presence. Like, that is what is happening in places like Finland, in that there's replacement level performance because we don't have the kind of culture where people have the kind of professional athlete attitude of, to be a professional is to show up with the winning effort. Like, that's what we need. And again, people can diss the Eurovision Song Contest, but like, it's just emblematic of where we are mentally as a culture zone. So that's why it's more worrying about the kind of national attitude. So that's why I made this video. Not because I massively wanted Darude to do well. But anyway, I think I pretty much said what I meant to say. And so that's the end of this video. And if you liked it, I thank you for watching. That's all for now. Bye bye.